everyone, and welcome. James, Chair of the United Way of Greater Greensboro's African American Leadership Affinity Group, also known as AAL. I want you to know that with United Way's support, AAL has made tremendous impact in the community. These caring community leaders represent more than 100 local employers and have helped the United Way raise in excess of $4 million. For the past 13 years, this event has given the entire community an opportunity to come together, taking part in engaging conversations and working together to make our community a better place. African American Male Initiative, which was started 10 years ago, thanks to this event, has engaged 247 adults who have mentored 257 local kids. This program offers mentor relationships to kids in Wiley Elementary, and we follow them through Jackson Middle School and Smith High School. In fact, many of the students who started the program in elementary school are going on to college, and they credit mentoring as a reason for their success. Today, we're going to build on this impact because in the years past, you will have an opportunity to ask questions and to decide how you want to be a part of making our community a better place for all residents. However, before we continue, I'd like to pause and recognize our sponsors who made today's event possible. Thank you to our gold sponsor, American National Bank. And we also appreciate our bronze sponsors, Cone Health Foundation, Cone Health System, Greensboro Housing Authority, and Lincoln Financial. If we were going to meet in person, this is when I would acknowledge those of you who brought coats, gloves, and socks for our children. But since we're gathered virtually, we will be giving you another way to uplift local children this holiday season at the conclusion of today's program. At this time, I'd like to turn over the program to my fellow AAL member, Carla Banks, who serves as Vice Chair. She will talk to you a little about United Way of Greater Greensboro's efforts to end poverty and give us an overview of today's events. At this point, Carla, take it away. You're on mute, Carla.
Try to follow the mute rule. Good
right.
morning. Thank you, Brian. It is an honor to serve as Vice Chair of the African American Leadership Cabinet. Despite being virtual this year, our focus of hosting an engaging and impactful event remains the same. This year's theme for Conversations with Community Leaders is Working Your Way Out of Poverty, addressing workforce development through equity and reentry. This focus is paramount because United Way of Greater Greensboro's goal is to end poverty in our city. One of the greatest steps a person can take on the path to self-sufficiency is finding a new or higher paying job. This is why United Way's strategic approach includes partnerships designed to educate, train, and connect adults to meaningful employment. In fact, thanks to their strategy and the community's support, last year more than 1,800 adults improved their job readiness skills or found a job. This is why initiatives such as United Way's Family Success Centers include a focus on helping adults achieve their goals of earning a GED, learning new skills, and ultimately being hired. Each of us deserves equal employment opportunities to take care of ourselves and our families. In recent months, however, we have been shown the reality that this doesn't exist for everyone, especially people of color. When a criminal record is added to the equation, committed and qualified people are often shut out of the employment process, which then generates the poverty cycle. More than 50% of the people in our community are living in poverty, and sadly, 25% of those numbers are children. In order to break the cycle of poverty, we must meet people where they are and provide them with tools to build a financially self-sufficient future. When we do meet people where they are, we have to be willing to understand their individual circumstances. All too often, someone who made choices that result in being part of the judicial or criminal system simply cannot hurdle the skeletons in their closet. Today, we will hear from 4 dynamic individuals who will talk about what's required to overcome the odds. And more importantly, they will tell us what we can do as a community to help those who are trying to work their way out of poverty. Edward Chap Williams works as the Reentry Director for the Guilford County Sheriff's Office. He will share his perspective of providing support to those who are released from jail. Chris Rivera is the Director of the City of Greensboro's Workforce Development Department. He will discuss the employment opportunities available through the NC Works Career Centers. Dr. Love Jones is the Director of the City of Greensboro's Human Rights Department. She will explain the strategy involved with Thrive GSO, the city's record expungement program. And last, but certainly not least, local business owner Lynch Hunt will share his inspiring story, highlighting the obstacles he faced after being released from prison. I will moderate a Q&A session with our panelists before taking your questions, and we hope that you will populate the chat as we're talking. We want you to leave today's conversation feeling educated and encouraged about what, as a community, we can do collectively to make a difference. Let's get started by welcoming Edward Chap Williams to the conversation. Chap has 30 plus years of experience as a community and criminal justice professional. His passion lies in developing programs and building infrastructures that assist justice-involved citizens in having a seamless transition back into their communities and, most importantly, to their families. He believes a renewed mind leads to discovery of self. With this discovery, one gains a clearer understanding of what is truth and what isn't. Welcome, Chap. So good to see you this morning.
Good morning. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Tell us about your role as the Reentry Director for the Guilford County Sheriff's Office, and how many inmates do you estimate that you assist each year?
Well, this year, I'll answer your last question first. As of this date, we've served from January 2020, we've served 143 individuals and their families. That's about an average of 12 folks a month. My role here as a director, we work directly with Department of Public Safety. We are a local reentry council. There's about 18 reentry councils throughout the state of North Carolina. Guilford County Reentry Council, our contact information is at every state facility in North Carolina. So if an individual is moving back to Guilford County, then that case manager, case worker, or whomever will contact us and let us know that Tony's on his way or her way back to Guilford County. What can you do to assist that individual? And so our team begins to work with that individual, making sure that we have the necessary supports and resources to help them and their family. For locally, we're probably the only local reentry council in the state of North Carolina that comes under the Sheriff's Department, which means that we have direct contact with the men and women who are leaving our county jails. And so there's a kiosk that's inside of the jail. They can email us, let us know that I'm getting out at the end of December. I think I want to go to rehab. What can you do to help me? So our team begins to work with that individual. My role here is just simply as an honest broker, making sure that we connect with stakeholders who are able to provide these resources and supports to make sure that there is a seamless transition for the individuals that we work with.
Okay, you mentioned rehab. So what types of services in addition to rehab are made available, and is this considered short-term?
Let me just give you an example of that. You know, we work with NC FIT, which is an acronym for Formerly Incarcerated Transition Program. They provide health care. And so it's very, you know, there's a big health disparity amongst men and women who are leaving our justice system. And so just a little example, we had an individual, she got employment. She went on the job, passed out, didn't realize she was a diabetic. And so we were able to work with NC FIT, got her connected with them, and they were able to get her medication. Now she's stable. So those are the kinds of connections that we have.
Okay. And as I had asked, is this considered short-term? Are you a support mechanism for a certain period of time?
No, we have folks who we've worked with for 1.5 years, 2 years. They have access to our cell phones. We text them, we email them, we try to stay in contact, send them encouraging words and let them know that we're still on their team. And so however long they need us.
That is good to know. Now, you talk about how you believe in helping these individuals have a renewed mind. How do you inspire the justice served to set realistic goals in order to prevent recidivism?
Well, helping them understand that this thing is one day at a time. That it's not a destiny, it's a journey. And so when we help them to, because many of them who come out, they want to get right at it, they want to do it fast, but it's a journey. And so we help them to understand that it's one day at a time. And so we begin to talk with them short-term goals, nothing major. Getting a car may be your long-term goal, but let's get you a bus pass so you can get back and forth to work. So those kinds of things we help them with.
Okay, well, thank you, Chap. We really do appreciate all that you do for our justice served community. We will monitor the chat and see if we have any questions that come in for you, and we'll bring you back in a little bit later.
Sounds good. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you. Now let's welcome Chris Rivera to the conversation. Chris Rivera is the director of the City of Greensboro's Workforce Development Department. Chris and his team sponsor all services and operations within the Greensboro, High Point, Guilford County Workforce Development Board, referred to as Guilford Works. A key component of his work is managing the NC Works Career Centers. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Carl. I appreciate being here.
Good to see you. Explain how NC Works is serving as a catalyst to connect our justice served population to meaningful employment while enhancing their skills to pursue in-demand occupations.
Thanks for that question, Carla. So our career centers serve job seekers throughout Guilford County by providing employment and training services and resources to those that are either underemployed or unemployed and can benefit from guided services that connect them to meaningful employment. As we're in this space now, employers are struggling to identify and hire individuals with skills needed to allow those organizations to remain competitive. And as our labor market tightens and retention rates plummet, demand for skilled workers, fuel this costly churn. To remain competitive, employers are under increased pressure to transform the way that they are identifying talent. So our approach to, workforce allows us to present regional talent and bridge those gaps across all demographics and socioeconomic, demographics, which includes the justice served population. We use a unique approach to present our job seekers in a holistic way. We provide the same access to the resources and tools to those with infractions, in their background as to those without. But, we can't, or we have to recognize that, or we cannot ignore the fact that a justice served individual's background is a factor, and therefore we have tools and methods in place to prepare individuals to present themselves as career-minded, hardworking job seekers. And these efforts help remove that stigma that's often attached to the justice-involved individual. We collaborate with local partners to assist individuals with their presentation skills, interpersonal skills, how they communicate the subject of criminal infractions. Our system is in the process of developing workshops, with content, specifically tailored to the needs of this group of job seekers to assist with their further professional development. We also direct a lot of our resources to incentivizing employers to provide opportunities for all job seekers, including justice served populations. This approach to employer job seekers' needs is, just an example of our scope and ability to address factors that enhance our justice served job seekers' ability to participate in the labor force in a meaningful way. And I finished that response by saying, equally as important to preparing a well-qualified workforce that meets the need of employers, I see the role of our workforce system as an advocate for those that need an opportunity to access employment and thrive in careers, inclusive of those that have been justice involved or justice served.
And it's worth noting the NC Works Career Centers, there's one in Greensboro and also one in High Point. So you're able to try to make it convenient for people to get to where they can get to the easiest. Now, speaking of employers, of course, the city of Greensboro is our employer, and I'm proud to say that the city is the first municipal government in North Carolina who banned the box. You talk about partnerships that Guilford Works tries to create within the community. What is the significance of banning the box and some of the other steps that have been taken to eliminate what would be considered barriers in the application process in terms of the reaction you get from employers when you try to encourage them to get on board with this notion of creating employment opportunities for the justice served?
Yeah, that's an excellent question and a lot to unpack. So the city of Greensboro being the first municipality in the state to ban the box was extremely significant. You know, it represented a body of government that serves the people to now be of the people, particularly in its hiring practices. You know, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the city has also recently enhanced its hiring practices by making sure that, you know, to remove any barriers that would normally impact an individual's ability to become employed with the city, specifically disregarding non-violent drug offenses appearing on the background check for non-safety positions as long as it is, you know, unrelated to the job function, and to also no longer, you know, reject non-safety sensitive job applicants for employment consideration when they test positive for THC. So these, you know, changes are significant because they often represent a significant percentage of justice-involved reports, but also disproportionately impact communities of color. I think that that is a bold move on behalf of the city, and I pray that more employers will explore similar models and take a close look at their hiring practices in the way that the city does. And the second part of your question, so reactions that we often get when encouraging employers to create employment opportunities for those reentering society are twofold. One, they express that they're open to it, but secondly, they do not want to be identified or branded as a second chance employer. Much of that is out of stigma and some of it is out of risk depending on the type of business. But truth be told, justice involved individuals want to be presented or considered in a fair manner that addresses their background without the background being a prohibiting factor to getting back to work. We often remind employers that, you know, in return for providing work opportunities and helping justice served individuals become productive members of society, they receive a skilled and motivated employee who adds immediate value to the organization. Most justice served, you know, individuals have knowledge, skills, and, you know, work-based experience that allow them to be immediate contributors to the workforce. And our system works to ensure that they're presented as such. So, you know, we remain encouraged that as the economy improves, more and more employers will reconsider their hiring practices to be more inclusive of justice served populations, and will continue to advocate for that, as well as, you know, for those that simply just want to go back to work and move on with their lives.
And for those who aren't familiar with the term ban the box, that is the application not including a box that asks whether you've been convicted of some sort of criminal event. And Chris, do you have any examples before we wrap up of any employers who have joined your efforts?
Not off the top of my head, you know, what we find is that, you know, there are not a lot of employers that are jumping on this ban the box initiative. We find that there are significant numbers of employers that are, you know, justice served friendly, that they are open to providing those opportunities. I think that our system can take a more pivotal role or central role in advocating for more employers to jump on the ban the box initiative.
Wonderful. And we are always encouraged to know that people are listening and that your workforce development connections are there to serve as a conduit to get more employers on board. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Next, we will welcome Dr. Love Jones to the conversation. Dr. Jones is the director of the city's Human Rights Department. She and her team promote mutual understanding, respect, and fair treatment of all Greensboro residents without regard to race, color, national origin, religion, gender, age, disability, or familial status. Welcome, Dr. Jones. Always good to see you.
Thank you, Carla.
We'll start by talking about Thrive GSO. Many folks may have never heard of the program. So tell us about the obstacles that existed prior to Thrive GSO for those who are seeking pro bono legal assistance to achieve record expungement.
So Thrive GSO was an initiative that was really birthed out of the observation of a need. Back in maybe 2014, I was working pretty consistently with a community partner, Irving Allen, who was responsible for connecting with an expungement initiative at the state level through the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. And so on an annual basis, once a year at best, the coalition would come to Greensboro and do an expungement clinic. Now, the reason they could only come once a year was extremely worthwhile. They went to several counties in the state. They tried to sweep through each year to have a presence in as many counties as possible. So you can imagine that their schedule was tight when it came to the ability to revisit communities. And so I went to a clinic, and by the time I got there, it was like Flight of the Bumblebee. Like, people were buzzing everywhere, getting so much done for members of the community who had long been awaiting the opportunity to have their records reviewed. And so in talking to Irving on the way out the door, he said, you should have been here at first thing in the morning when the line was wrapped around the building. And I looked at the building and I imagined all these people wrapped around it. And I said, well, what is it that we could do, that would maybe decrease the wait? And he said, well, we'd have to have more clinics on a regular basis locally. And so I just happened to kind of still ponder that, got in connection with, at the time, a former city attorney, Tom Carruthers, and I'm just literally casually talking about what I did during the previous week. And I mentioned the clinic, and he says, really? People wrapped around the building? I said, yes. He said, well, through our Greensboro Bar Association, we're a part of the Second Chance Initiative, and we've actually been looking for people. We've been sitting dormant for a little bit, trying to find where we can help people with their, record review and expungement. So clearly I connected the dots, and that really was how Thrive was birthed. We had a concerned city attorney, a longstanding grassroots organizer who had been doing the work, and then myself as a human rights worker. We put our heads together and we really moved forward with the initiative. And the benefit of the initiative at its origin was that people would be able to more frequently contact attorneys who were offering pro bono, or at least on a sliding fee scale, depending on income, the ability to have their records reviewed and expunged. Expungement is expensive, and people don't realize how cost prohibitive it can be. Now, what I have to say is that the way that we evolved into developing the bigger picture of what Thrive is about, and that answers your question further as far as what were the obstacles before versus now. We learned early on that because of our state laws, only about 10% of people who applied to have their records reviewed were actually going to be able to get charges removed because of state statutes, et cetera. And so that meant that people sometimes still walked away from expungement with a certain hopelessness. And Thrive was about the restoration of hope. And so we, took the moment to zoom out, to broaden the lens. And we said, well, there's some other areas where we could be helpful, even if expungement is not possible. So we developed a 4-prong approach that examines education, employment, housing, and voting. And looking at all 4 of those core areas as ways in which people thrive in this community: the ability to have a civic stake in what's happening, the ability to have safe and secure housing, the ability to have a job to earn, a living wage, and of course, to achieve the education necessary to access those jobs, whatever training may be available. And so that's really how the name Thrive began to flourish, because we believe that aside from expungement, people still need to be able to access resources that make them successful in Greensboro. Now, we're not a service provider, And that's where the difference lies. Beforehand, people would be looking for the resources for housing, employment, education, et cetera, and they'd have to do this kind of hopscotch all over the city to find the right service provider to help them with the right resource under the right circumstances. What Thrive does is basically serve as a filter, a screening, if you will. Our office is equipped with Jody Stanley, who's our outreach and education coordinator. And we created a hub where people who provide the services organize with us on a regular basis to share the ways in which their services are evolving, the new things that they offer, et cetera. Maybe the specific population that they're targeting, what have you. Jody then takes the responsibility of vetting requests as they come in from the community. A person may call and say they need housing, but they may suggest that they have these kinds of charges and that they perhaps have previously been incarcerated or not. And you use all of those kind of matrices, those kinds of factors to determine, oh, this organization would be the best organization to help you with this matter. What that prevents is people growing weary, people getting tired of trying to find the right person to help. Jody takes on the responsibility, I take on the responsibility of making sure that we have an understanding of what our partners offer so that they can make a beeline to the services that they need.
Excellent. It sounds like the way you've broken it down and formulated community connections has really been instrumental in making Thrive GSO not only successful, but beneficial. It's not another stepping stone or another hoop. It's an actual doorway that people can open and walk through it. We're going to circle back to you, Dr. Jones, during the Q&A. I see some folks populating the chat.
Sure.
So we thank you for leading the charge and bringing Thrive GSO to reality.
Thank you.
Last and certainly not least, we welcome Lynch Hunt to the conversation. After serving 10 years in federal prison, Coach Lynch Hunt is highly sought after as a motivational speaker. He is an author, recording artist, curriculum developer, community organizer, and criminal justice reform activist. Through trial and error, Coach Lynch founded AWOL Fitness, which has evolved from mission to movement, seeking to empower people to transform their minds and bodies. Welcome, Coach Hunt.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That was awesome. I might take that and use it again or something like that.
Feel free.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
We're so glad to have you because you are really the foundation of what today's conversation is about. You've lived it and you are living proof. So let's start by you telling us the most challenging part of transitioning from federal prison to seeking gainful employment.
All right, this is a two-part answer. My first answer was, and this is surface, it was that box that you guys banned already. So like that box was like a monster when I faced it. I looked at it, I saw it, and I was faced with a decision. Do I check this box or do I leave it open? And this is my first shot at being honest or dishonest. And my number one hurdle and barrier that I had to face and get over was, had I become the man that I needed to become a productive member of society? So here I am with my biggest challenge. Did I really transform? Now I'm presented with something that, do I do the right thing or the wrong thing right now? And this may push me over the edge or push me back to the life that I came from. This was tough. And I will admit that I did not check the box. I just had enough faith in my vision and the passion that I chose, the path that I chose, and the passion that I had for it, that things would work out. And with God, that took place. Usually, prisoners or people leaving from prison, they don't help prepare you for the immediate things that are going to come your way as soon as you come out. So for me, those things were intentional. I just kind of forgot about that box. And that was one of the things that I didn't prepare for. Everything else I was ready for.
Okay, so I might have to rephrase the next question. Since you did not check the box, Are you able to say what percentage of doors were slammed in your face per se, once you felt employers knew about your past?
Yeah, so I didn't get any doors slammed in my face. I landed my first job in the halfway house was as a personal trainer. But when I left, my first 6 months was done in Philly, and then I moved here. So I actually had to do the whole process over again, which scared me all over again. But I did not get, it was just at 100% track record at this point and a reference. And, I also had time in as a personal trainer because I chose one thing that some inmates don't, and that's to actually take the test prior to coming home. So I would have 7 or 8 years worth of experience on my resume, as opposed to some of those guys not having any experience. So I was able to use that as to my advantage.
Okay, so that really got the wheels in motion to where you are now self-employed. So
Yes.
tell us, how long did that journey take to get from your first job, personal training, to now owning AWOL Fitness?
It took about a year and a half.
Wow.
Yes, it took a year and a half. I spent a year at the Rush on Battleground in Brassville, building brand name and face recognition. But I also spent time proving theories while I was there. Just through my upbringing with poverty, with sports, with school, with the streets, I'm kind of conditioned to be conscious of problems and the needs of society, or the circumstance, whatever the circumstance is. But as a leader, I'm actually conditioned to come up with solutions and to solve problems or provide services. And I saw a demographic that was underserved, and I saw what was working for the gym, what was working for the gym individually, what was working for the client individually, and what was working for the trainers or not working for them individually. And I came up with something that could create a win-win-win situation for everyone involved. And that's how the birth of this movement was started. The one thing that was missing from the industry as a whole was that people are coming for physical transformation, but they're not focusing on their mind. And the Bible tells us that true transformation can't happen without a renewal of the mind. A lot of science tells us that the body won't go anywhere the mind don't tell it to go. So you cannot have a lasting physical transformation without tackling the mindset. So I created a niche by putting personal development with fitness so that people could have lasting transformations that will go well beyond just weight loss, and it could transform into their lives and transcend, where they were when they first met me or came into my program or my services.
Wow, I feel transformed just from hearing you speak.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Coach Hunt, and congratulations. We're so excited to see that you are a success story. I'm sure that what you have shared has spoken to many hearts. And if there's someone out there who can relate, you have probably inspired them and motivated them to keep pressing. Now we're going to circle back to you. I'm going to go to the chat. We do have some questions from folks, and we'll start with, what is the liability for employers to jump on Ban the Box? Anyone on the panel?
Yeah, I'll take that question and certainly welcome other feedback. There is no liability to this initiative. The Ban the Box, as Michelle Clark placed in the chat, is simply just removing the question from the application process. That often we're human, and we have our own preconceived notions about what infraction, misdemeanor, felony, justice involved means. It has a way of prejudicing the process and or discounting an individual's skills, legitimate skills that could be beneficial to the workplace. And in removing that question, it removes that cloud of judgment and allows you to truly just assess, based on what you are seeing, what this individual may or may not be able to contribute to the role and or organization. Now, employers have, their own internal hiring practices or pre-employment background screenings. If there are things that just are absolute deal breakers, you can learn that after you learn more about the person than their past, what they're able to contribute opposed to what they have done that has zero bearing in many cases on what they're able to contribute to the workforce. So I don't see there being a liability in that.
Okay, and it sounds like ban the box is an option. Someone is asking, is it optional for employers? I guess it depends on how you create your application form.
Yeah, absolutely. It is optional. There is, again, no risk in removing it, particularly if in your hiring process, you're going to do that criminal background check, that you can then have a different type of discussion. So optional, yes. We hope that more and more employers will jump on that, because you lose nothing in removing it if you're going to ask the question or research or investigate on the back end.
Does anyone else on the panel want to address that? Love, I see your hand up.
Sure. The only thing I want to say quickly is that people don't know that there are often incentives for hiring those who have a criminal background or, a record or what have you. There are tax credits that many employers can receive for hiring those who were previously incarcerated within the first 365 days of being released. Something to the tune of, I think, $2,400 per employee. Now, of course, you have to qualify. We had an entrepreneur on a panel a couple of years ago who owns a trucking company who spoke of the ability to receive those incentives. And a lot of times people worry about the insurance liabilities and things like that, but we're actually at a place in time where you can be federally incentivized for hiring those who have some blemishes on their record. So it's also a matter of knowing the facts about the fact that in addition to there being no liability for removing the box, there's also incentive for hiring those who have a background.
Good to know. Chap, I'm curious, based on what Coach Lynch had shared, he wasn't thinking about the box before he was going to start the reentry process. Is that something you discuss as the individuals are getting ready to leave the system?
We don't talk about that much. Simply, when we talk about the renewed mind, and the truth, Coach talked about, should he or shouldn't he? And so, and that kind of encompasses all of those things. Where are you at with your space in life? And that we need to walk in that way that will not haunt you in the end.
Okay. Any other comments from the panel?
So I'd also add to what Love had shared. In addition to there being incentives for, employing formerly incarcerated individuals, there are also state and federal bonding programs that are available. And so as employers come across individuals that feel are good fits but have some sort of hesitation, they can be bonded in that they're not bearing the full risk in itself. So we can certainly collect that information, what Love has shared and what I've just shared there, and have it circulated if Michael and the team are comfortable with that.
Excellent. And yes, Chap.
Or let me go back to your question. When you understand that many folks who are coming out of prison and jail have dealt with so much trauma, and that trauma over a period of time begins to surface. And if we're not, again, that renewed mind, that's my my piece, is that if we're not beginning to address those issues. We had a guy who was out 2 years working, and he was molested on the inside. Nobody knew that. And then he started having issues with all of that. It just came out of nowhere. And we were able to work with the Kellum Foundation. They have a sliding scale, got him a therapist. So, that trauma is significant. And, it's just not about getting somebody a job or a house. It's about that mindset. It's about making sure that that mental health component is addressed. And so those are the things that we find to be significant and important.
Very good point. Michelle indicates that the goal of Ban the Box is to be more equitable in the interview process. So we're hoping those who have joined this Zoom who have that kind of authority in your organization, that you will review what is your policy, whether or not you have banned the box or not, and then determine how you might be able to move in that direction. Let's see. So we talked a little bit about THC, so that's connected with marijuana. Sarah's asking about a policy specifically pertaining to THC and the language and how this gets presented to employers. Not sure if, Brian, do you want to tackle that?
I'm sorry, Carla, you're asking me the question?
Yeah, it's just in terms of how that policy would look. How would that be presented to employers who haven't really thought about whether or not THC would be something that they would overlook if it's not a safety sensitive position, which is the position the city of Greensboro has taken.
Yeah, so there's a lot of legislation currently going on, even on the federal level. There was a bill proposed by Congress last week about legalizing marijuana on the federal level. So it is becoming more prevalent. It is legalized in a lot of states. And I know that recently, Jamal Waterman, who is HR director for the city, made a proposal, which I think has been approved officially, and Chris mentioned it earlier, but not essentially testing for THC on non-safety sensitive positions. Now, obviously, when there are issues around operating certain heavy equipment or vehicles or certain jobs, it would become an issue. But it really, for some folks, it could serve as an additional barrier to employment, which creates other issues around poverty and economics and access and many other things. So, so certainly, if it's not a safety sensitive position, it really becomes an irrelevant issue. And I think today it kind of weaves into what we're trying to do, is trying to figure out how to remove as many barriers as we can to people being able to get gainful employment.
Okay, well, I think whatever steps to be taken certainly need to happen so that we can remove unnecessary barriers. And hearing from individuals who have experienced it firsthand, you know it's real. And I think most times people who haven't been involved in the criminal justice system don't know anyone who's been behind bars. You don't even think about the struggle, the challenge, the setbacks, and how long it can take before someone can be whole again. And I think, you know, we have a responsibility as a community to consider these realities and do what we can to speak up and speak out and support these efforts. I don't see any more questions per se, but just some comments in terms of Mayor Vaughn has joined us. Thank you, Mayor Vaughn. And she noted that the city of Greensboro also stopped asking for salary history. Therefore, salary is based on the job and not what someone previously earned. And Michelle did some history for us, some research to indicate 13 states banned the box to create more equity in hiring. North Carolina legislative leaders rejected ban the box as a potential good practice in our state. I don't know the exact year, but when the city of Greensboro made that decision, that was predated my arrival to the city of Greensboro. So it's been many years ago that they made that decision. Michelle, did you want to add to that as our executive director for United Way of Greater Greensboro?
So I don't know that I have anything specific to add to it, except to say that advocacy is very important. And I think sometimes we lose our voice because we believe that we only should go and click the box at the poll. But it is also that work outside of the voting process that's really important. And if we want a more equitable society, if we want to address the systems that keep people in poverty, we must speak out about policies that actually are oppressing some groups of people. And ban the box, ban pay history, are just small examples. You know, for example, if you come out of prison, public housing is not always an option for you, even though your entire family is there. So we actually separate you from the family. That's a policy. So we have to sneak you in. And that can get us all evicted. So, you know, and again, it's just one example, but we can only have a voice of advocacy if we decide to educate ourselves. So I commend African American leadership for having sessions like this, which educate the community, because I submit to you, there are people who did not know about some of the topics that you're talking about. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We always love to have your input. Coach Lynch, I want to go back to you because I feel like you can really speak to this topic more so than anyone else. And I do see a few other folks on the call who may relate to your story. Can you tell us a little bit more in terms of reaction? We talk about stigma. I think it's not really perceived as being as problematic as it really is. Would you agree or disagree that if you've served time, there is some kind of stigma associated with that?
Yes, it's a huge stigma associated with it. But like Chap was saying, if the person has evolved into someone different, then it kind of doesn't really matter, you know, what your past is. So I use my story, you know, to my advantage now. But it took me a long time to actually get to that point where I was able to tell it and feel comfortable about telling it. So I was sitting on this powerful tool for 5 or 6 years because I just didn't think that I had enough value built up in the community for everybody to accept me. And, you know, it's kind of tough, but I believe that, you know, me now as the kind of programs or, you know, just services that I offer, just in being a mentor to help people, you know, find those things and find their gifts. You know, I'm doing public speaking now. These are things that I never even thought about prior to this, but you know, just arming myself with information, like you know, education, just educating myself, knowing that now, you know, I tell people what their gift is. Your gift is the thing that you do the absolute best with the least amount of effort. And for some reason, you know, I can just motivate people, you know, through my words. So it's a gift. And now I can move in that lane, in that vein, and, you know, benefit from it.
Wonderful. And we love to get that perspective that you offer. And I think the renewed mind is so very pivotal in what you're saying. I think the challenge comes from people who want to judge and keep you in that place where you were. So you had that moment of maybe bad choices, and then it led you down that path, but you've worked to come back and really reinvent yourself, so to speak.
Let me say one more thing, Carla. Look, the world will change their opinion of you the day after you do. I'm gonna say that one more time.
Absolutely.
The world will change their opinion of you the day after you do. So all of these people I met before they actually knew I was formerly incarcerated, right? But in telling them that now, they would say, no, or that's not the guy that I know. So I was dedicated and disciplined to killing that guy. And when you meet someone like that, you'll know that that person isn't that person anymore. So as an employer, I actually have a more effective way of performing a SWOT analysis, you know, understanding people's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And as employers, if we can perform SWOT analysis on all our employees, we'll know what we're getting out of that person, regardless of what they filled out on a paper, regardless of what their history is or their schooling and background is. The strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, they change all the time. And we got to be aware of that.
Yeah. Carla, can I give a correction?
Yeah.
So Tina Akers-Brown, the former CEO of Greensboro Public Housing, shared that there is now more flexibility with the previously incarcerated.
Okay.
So in the event that we didn't see it, it's not 100% exclusion the way it used to be. So now there is more flexibility. You know, let's put air quotes around flexibility. And at least people know they can ask the question and there could be exceptions made. And I think that that is a blessing. And that is the path to more equity.
Absolutely. And I think Dr. Jones can chime in from the fair housing perspective that kind of falls under your wheelhouse.
Yes, that kind of alludes to a comment, a final comment I wanted to make. Myth busting is critical in this work. It's absolutely vital. There was a fair housing rule in 2016 that then stated that discretion could be used by housing providers of federally funded properties. So this kind of zero tolerance as far as criminal background went away with that rule. And now there is the ability to use discretion. But other myths along the same line include the fact that if you have a felony on your record, only the class of the felony dictates whether or not your voting rights are revoked. And initially, people assumed that if you had a felony, then you just didn't vote and did not participate in our country's democracy. And that's actually not the case. The same thing is with who we think has felonies. I have had several interns intentionally in my department who are college students who have records because they still, they still are under this kind of idea that they're doomed because of something that they acquired actually right at the cusp of 18 in high school. And so you'd be surprised how many of our college populations in our city are trying to navigate the reentry process, even though some of them may have never been incarcerated. Some of them have certain classes of felonies that are following them. What's most unfortunate is that sometimes the infraction happens at the age of 18 while still in high school, but the case is not reconciled until well into college. So they've got a good launch pad and they're off to a great start. But once that charge sticks, that creates a whole new plethora of issues. And so also what we think the phrase felon, the term having a felony or the phrase having a felony encapsulates, we have to open our minds up and realize that people find themselves in unique spaces and places all the time. I tell people every day, I am from several places in life, not just one. And in that, it's important to note that, when you think of who you're opening your doors to, there isn't one kind of person who's navigated the reentry system. So those kind of myths are what we have to keep coming together to have these conversations for, so that we can bust those myths and help people really be open-minded.
Absolutely. I always challenge people to consider walking a mile in someone else's shoes. Then that way, maybe that helps to broaden your perspective and open your mind. Danny asks, how can city policy be changed to let employers hire people with background check issues to work on city sites? I'm not sure, Chris Rivera, if that is something you could touch on.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any city policy that prohibits that. Not to say that it does not exist. Certainly we can do some research and share that with our manager's office as, a question that has been raised.
Yes. And Peggy has made some points to say that oftentimes these policies were made with the intent to suppress certain groups of people. And as I said in the opening, oftentimes this issue is more prevalent for people of color. And Peggy also added that just having that one pivotal question on the application, have you been convicted of a felony, that can hinder all sorts of things, whether you get access to food stamps, whether you can qualify for a student loan, maybe even getting a business license, and housing. We talked about housing. So we heard from Coach Lynch, who opted not to check the box, and that worked to his advantage. I do believe that you still undergo a background check, whether there's a box to check or not. So it's really up to the employer based on what comes back in that background check, whether or not you're going to be considered a liability to hire.
Yeah, Carla,
Yes.
I just want to be real careful on this call. We are not condoning that you not tell the truth on an application. So I just don't want anybody to send me an email later.
Okay.
Coach Lynch made a strategic decision for himself so that he could take care of himself and his family. The United Way of Greater Greensboro condones truth on applications of employment. So please, when you want to quote me, quote that. We want people to be honest. We also know truth, felonies are committed, and there are people who never serve 1 day of prison time. And so that's why, myth busting, as Love pointed out, is very important. There are lots of people who have committed felonies in the United States of America that have not been subject to mass incarceration.
Amen. Pat made a very interesting point and saying that a UNCG grad student was arrested and in prison in DC for more than a year and was incorrectly incarcerated and missed the birth of his daughter. So his graduate thesis consisted of wearing an orange jumpsuit on the UNCG campus to make people aware of incorrect incarceration. So
Carla,
it is very real.
Carla,
Yes.
this is Peggy. I just wanted to add something as well, to kind of piggyback on what Michelle said. You definitely want to be honest anytime you are filling out an application, speaking to employers, because even if you are a good person, there's some cases they would have hired you even though you did have a blemish on your background. But if they find out you lied on your application, they can and have right to turn around and fire you. The whole purpose of banning the box is to get people to have conversations before they automatically reject an applicant just because they have a blemish or check that certain box that they've been convicted of a felony in the past.
Thank you, Peggy. Peggy serves on our AAL cabinet and she is an HR director. So she sees all things application oriented and we appreciate that perspective. And that is an excellent point. So as we said, you have to just kind of navigate this the best way you know how, and based on the circumstance, I would imagine will dictate. But by all means, check the box. And I always say what's meant for you can't go to anyone else. So the box just may be a formality. They may take it seriously, maybe not, but don't put yourself in a negative light, knowing that you should check it and then opt not to check it, or whatever additional issues can arise as a result of how you handle it. But always be encouraged to know that there are the resources, as Chap Williams explained, and then support groups and have a support system within your framework. But I think as the employer community, we've got to start having these conversations more often and be more candid and be willing to recognize that this is a real thing and it's affecting a huge percentage of our community and our population. And as Chris Rivera pointed out, they're skilled and ready to work. So why deny them that opportunity? Any additional comments from the panel?
Simply that the reason why I've appreciated those opportunities to talk with people about their background, i.e. the number of interns I've had that have backgrounds, is that it gives me an opportunity to really reflect on my own experience and the fact that I'm not exempt. And so sometimes they sit down and say, hey, Dr. Love, before we finish this up and I fill out this background check, I just want to let you know that XYZ happened. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I've done a lot of stuff no one knows about. I feel like we're in the same boat. And so for me, it's just a matter of extending grace, because that is what it means to be in a position of power, is to extend grace. And in that, I am delighted when people shoot straight with me, because it allows me to shoot straight with myself and then open a door.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I think when more individuals realize that we're all complex individuals, so everyone didn't just come out of the crib and land in the positions that they stand in before you. So it takes a lot of transformation. Even if you weren't criminally involved in anything, everybody had to transform at some point to get to where they are. Yes, Coach Lynch.
So for a lot of people, it's just a box, and then you're like, check it and be honest and stuff. But I was a 37-year-old grown man who never held a job before. And the first chance I get at employment, I'm met with this box of this monster. And some people don't understand that, as a 37-year-old man with a no job history, and then I'm actually going into a built-in family where, you know, you have your ego where you may have to provide or help provide for this family. And as a man, you know, what do you do? And sometimes these things are no, to you, it's just a conversation. And for me, it's a pivotal point where, you know, a lot of us do dishonest things on a regular basis, every day. We just don't tell, we lie to ourselves, and we think that, you know, it's just a small white lie. But sometimes you have to make a decision based off of your vision. And that vision is a function of the heart and has nothing to do with your eyes, which is just a function of sight. So, you know, sometimes you can't feel what another person feels, and when they're going through it, and for you, it's a formality. For them, it's life or death. So they make a decision based off of instinct and not based off a manual. And that's the difference between developing genius or being inventive or having abundance of inventiveness and genius, where people follow manuals and other people follow instincts.
Absolutely. Now, based on your own experience, how has that formulated decisions that you make as an employer?
As an employer, I make people spend time with me. Basically, what they have to go through the smallest, lowest part of the totem pole to even be in my presence. So when they come, they might want to do personal training, but guess what they have to do? Clean the bathroom. That's going to show me how much they've grown. So there's a guy that's been through all the programs down there. His name is Carlos White. He went through NC Works. He did everything he needed to do there. He wasn't from here. He went to the halfway house there. He came over to my spot, volunteered, wind up getting a job across the street at the IRC Center, wound up going to NC Works, wound up going to school, getting his CDLs. I drove him around the whole entire time and didn't even know him from a can of paint. But I was able to bond with him based off of everything we did every time we met. And that allowed me to see who he was and that that man has changed. He did over 17 years and gave back a life sentence. But he was willing to say, when I told him that I didn't have much to pay him or I couldn't pay him, he was willing to say, I would volunteer my time. I just want to be around positive energy. So those things tell you different stuff. I don't have a application process, but I just ran payroll and paid 9 people. So there's a difference. There's a major difference in using what you know and then applying what you feel is right at the same time. And that's the reason why our systems will never transcend, because everybody is institutionalized with what we put together from the start. And a lot of it is not even, wasn't right from the start.
Right. I think what you just shared speaks to Trudy's point. When more people with power use that power to open doors for those who feel powerless, so many lives and communities will be transformed. So you are definitely using your power in the right way, and we thank you for that. Abby adds that the box sets up a situation where you're darned if you do and darned if you don't. It's a no-win situation when there is a box. So I think the takeaway today is to find out, does your employer have a box? You may not even remember when you filled out the application for the job you have now, but you are employed. So can you do that small part to go investigate and ask, hey, does our application have a box that asks whether or not you've been convicted of any criminal offense,
And
primarily
Carla,
felony? Yes.
truth and honesty, I think it's important for us to walk in our truth. The United Way of Greater Greensboro had the box.
Oh,
United Way of Greater Greensboro took the box off in 2020.
oh, wow.
So,
Welcome to the club.
yeah, so what happened is you would be surprised that you don't even know what you have
Mhm.
until we decided to be educated consumers and speak truth to ourselves first, because it's easy to go and sweep under other people's carpet.
Yes.
But we swept under our own, no pay history, and ban the box is what we live. And so I invite everybody to please go out and ask the question, because You might be working for someone who doesn't even know that the box is on the application because it's like wallpaper. You don't notice it after a while. It's just there.
Yes.
So I just wanted to speak truth because I don't want people to think that we are elitists or that we're perfect, because we're not.
Well, we do have Thomas, who has indicated that he did check the box and it didn't bode well for him. It came back to hurt him. I'd love to hear Thomas explain what that situation was about.
Thank you. You know, I've done over 15 years of my life in prison, and coming to Greensboro as an activist and sharing my story. I've been here in Greensboro like now 34 years, sharing my story. I've served over 15 years of my life in prison. I'm living with HIV 31 years. I'm a recovering addict from crack cocaine 31 years. But when I go into the businesses, even being told by managers and all to fill out the application, I never get a phone call. I never get not any kind of response whatsoever. Filled out an application at Circle K. They ran my background check all the way back to 77. I got out of prison in 2000, free man. I've taken all my sentences to the door, maxed it out. And I mean, I'm an honest man. I just share my true story and I don't hide. But I never get any kind of leeway. And I'm able to work. Yes, I'm living with HIV, but I'm honest about it. I don't have cuts. I'm an educator. I'm a facilitator. And I don't think it's fair. But I'm good because I'm able to change the lives of young men and women, everybody really. And I enjoy what I do in the community. I'm a national volunteer. So I'm able to share my story with everybody, but it just hurts to know that I'm wanting to work, but never get an opportunity to show my skills or my qualifications.
Yes, and that's the reality that we speak of. You are living proof of that very scenario. And
Carla, can I just say,
Yeah.
can I just say one thing? Because I think most everybody on the call knows I also serve as a chief of police for Greensboro. And this is so important that people who are formerly incarcerated have an opportunity to support themselves and their families. We as a community should not make them serve an additional sentence by denying them opportunity. You know, I know Lynch Hunt, and he's a friend of mine, and that's it. That's what matters, because I know who he is, and I know the value that he's had to this community. And if he had not either had an opportunity or paved a way for himself, we wouldn't know Lynch Hunt. He wouldn't be on this call right now. So how many other Lynch Hunts are there out there that have this potential that are not getting that first opportunity? So when you talk about ban the box, I think Peggy mentioned it, it's so you can at least get to the interview. Yeah. So it doesn't automatically eliminate you from contention for an employment opportunity. So you can at least get to the interview so we can get to know who's actually applying and see what their value is. And perhaps that overshadows whatever their history is. And like Love said, there's a lot of stuff that everybody's done that nobody knows about, you know? And so we have to get out of that space and understand if someone's been to prison or jail or whatever the case is, and they pay their debt to society, now they deserve an opportunity to have gainful employment. And that factors into everything that we should be trying to do as a community.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Bernita adds to the conversation that knowledge is power. Many of us have the power to influence the organizations we work for and to initiate change that benefits individuals who look like us. So once again, I put the call to action out, and Rhonda has already answered the call. She sent an email to her HR director asking about the box, and she couldn't recall whether or not it was there. And turns out they do have the box, so they will be having a discussion. So thank you, Rhonda, for that. Don't want to miss any questions. So Trudy made a good point to what Thomas shared about not being the same person you were yesterday, much less who were you in 1977. And that's an excellent point. As I said before, we've all had to transform multiple times throughout our lives to get to where we are. So let's not be so judgmental if we have no experience of the criminal justice system. It really doesn't matter. Let's see. I see your hand up, Chap.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell Thomas to please get in touch with us. If you're looking for work, you'll be sending out our information at the end of this, correct?
Yes, that
Yeah.
will come through United Way.
Give me a holler, Thomas.
Yeah, so Thomas, I private inboxed you with my contact information. We'd love to get you connected to some support.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'll be in contact.
And that's the beauty of conversations like this. We call it conversations with the community for a reason. We want to elevate and spotlight issues that are real that maybe don't get talked about publicly as often as they should. But we always find that when we host this event every year, and we don't have the pancakes and sausage and waffles and all the wonderful breakfast items that we usually have at 7:30 in the morning, we moved the time, and we were going to have this as a brunch before COVID. But we always find that afterwards, it's the connections that happen during these conversations that make a real difference in the lives of so many people. We appreciate all the comments. It seems like most people are feeling like this was worthwhile, educational, informative, eye-opening, moving, and soul-changing. We do really want to make this an opportunity where you can do your part. As a community, we have to be willing to recognize what role can we play? How can we give that hand up an opportunity to advance that individual in the justice served community who is being held back? Anything else from our panel before I turn it back over to our chair? Seeing no hands. Okay, well, thank you everyone for your comments, for your questions. Thank you to our panel for your honesty, transparency. Loved hearing the input from our other members of AAL, and of course, Mayor Vaughn and Michelle Gathers-Clark for joining us and sharing as well. This time, I'm going to turn it back over to our chair, Brian James.
Carla?
Right.
I hear a voice. Yes, Tara.
Will the comments in the chat be able to be shared, saved and shared with the presenters, and also with Thomas? I'm not sure if they're able to see the chat at this time. And there are some lovely comments for people who and they might want to see those as well.
Okay, I'll defer to Michael. Is the chat going to be the comments available after this session stops recording?
Yes, absolutely, Chair. A lot of follow-up information for everyone.
Okay, perfect. And Pat says you can save the chat by clicking on the three dots in your chat box, and click Save Chat. Pat is our lifesaver. She is knowledgeable of all things. Complete community rock star. Thank you, Pat. Okay, I am going to turn it back over to Brian.
All right, thank you, Carla, and thank you to our panelists. Let's all give them a virtual round of applause, please. All right. So now that we've been gifted with this great information, how should we respond? We have 4 ways you can make a big impact. First, we hope that you share what you've learned today with a coworker, colleague, family member, or friend. So important to share this information. More people need to understand the reality of poverty and the stigma that so many people face while they try to improve their lives and help their families. Secondly, if you represent a local business, we want you to ban the box or commit to not automatically omitting someone in your hiring process just because they have a criminal background. Very, very important. Please consider that. If you have that power or that influence, please consider that. We know that you may have a certain policy requirement that keeps you from hiring people with a criminal background for certain positions, but you may still have the opportunity to place someone in a different position. All we're asking is that you give people a chance. If you're willing to do this, please respond to the follow-up email you will receive from us after today's meeting. Adults in this community need your support, and so do the youth, which is why the third thing we're asking for you to consider is becoming a mentor to a local youth. I personally have been a mentor to a local youth for over 4 years, and I'm here to tell you that each one of you has the power to positively impact the life of a young man or young woman in powerful ways. It is also proven that youth who have a positive adult figure or mentor in their life at a young age are far more likely to succeed in school and far less likely to be involved in criminal activities later in life. You will also have the opportunity to learn more about mentoring and to sign up in the following email. Lastly, we'd like to ask that you make a gift to United Way this holiday season that will help lift local children out of poverty. Normally at our annual Conversations with Community Leader events, we ask attendees to bring socks and coats and donate to local kids to have during the winter months. Since we are unable to gather coats and socks, we are asking you to get your phones out and text the word LIFT, L-I-F-T, to 40403. That's LIFT to 40403, which you see on your screen. Whether it's $5, $50, or $500, every gift will impact a child. When you text LIFT to 40403, click on the link and you will be taken to a web page that will offer additional information and a few examples of the impact you make. Again, please text the word LIFT to 40403. We will also include a link to make a gift in the follow-up email. Whether it's a monetary gift, a gift of our time, any support is appreciated as we all work together to make the community a better place. Please be on the lookout for the follow-up email you will receive. Thank you again for attending today's meeting and investing in our community. Here's to hoping that we will be gathered in person next year. I'm certainly looking forward to it because there's normally some food involved, but we're hoping to gather in person again next year. And with that, I'll tell you, thank you so much for taking out time today for this very worthwhile cause. And we hope that you have a great and safe day and happy holidays to everyone. Thanks so much for attending. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.